"Pretend to be my wife," whispered the billionaire to the obese girl. But nothing could prepare her for the shocking condition that came next. She's a simple hospital worker, just trying to save her grandmother's home. He's a powerful billionaire, terrified of losing the one person he still loves, his sick mother. But the second she agrees to help him, her whole world flips. Within hours, she's pulled into his mansion, his family's lies, and their cold, ruthless plan to take everything he has. Just when she thinks things might get better, a dark secret from his family erupts, one that targets her, tries to crush her spirit, and nearly destroys both of their lives. Why did he really choose her? What is his family hiding? And can a fake marriage built on lies lead to a love that saves them both, or tear everything apart? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The fluorescent lights of Meadowview Community Hospital cast a soft glow through the corridors as Janelle Brooks finished adjusting Mrs. Peterson's pillows. The elderly woman had finally drifted off to sleep after complaining about her arthritis for the better part of an hour. Janelle didn't mind. Listening was part of what made her good at her job. "Sweet dreams, Mrs. Peterson," she whispered, dimming the lights before stepping into the hallway. The autumn wind rattled against the windows, creating an eerie melody in the quiet hospital corridor. At this hour, most visitors had gone home, leaving behind the familiar hush that settled over the night shift. Janelle smoothed down her scrubs, mentally checking off her rounds when movement caught her eye. A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit paced the waiting area, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. Even from a distance, Janelle could see the tension in his broad shoulders. He ran his fingers through his dark hair repeatedly, messing up what had probably been a perfectly styled look earlier that day. Something about his distress tugged at her heart. As a nursing assistant, Janelle had seen countless worried family members, but there was something different about this man's quiet desperation. His breathing came in short, sharp bursts, the beginning of a panic attack if she'd ever seen one. Without hesitation, Janelle approached the water cooler, filled a paper cup, and walked toward him. "Sir," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Would you like some water?" He turned, and Janelle found herself looking into stormy grey eyes filled with raw anguish. Up close, she could see the fine cut of his suit, the expensive watch on his wrist, clear signs of wealth that somehow made his vulnerability even more striking. He started, then swallowed hard. "Thank you." His voice was rough, as though he'd been holding back too many emotions for too long. "I'm Janelle," she offered, watching as he took the cup with slightly trembling hands. "Would you like to sit down?" He shook his head, then seemed to catch himself. "Elias," he managed. "Elias Hartwell." The name clicked in her mind. She'd seen it in magazines and business news, the billionaire CEO of Hartwell Industries. But right now, he just looked like a scared son who'd received terrible news. "I heard about your mother," Janelle said gently. "The stroke. Would you like to talk about it?" Elias's facade cracked slightly. "I haven't." He took a shaky breath. "I haven't spoken to her properly in years, just formal holiday calls and company events." His laugh was hollow. The mighty Hartwell family tradition, putting business before everything else. Janelle stayed quiet, offering silent support as he continued. "She tried to warn me about becoming like my father, cold, distant, obsessed with the company's success." He crumpled the paper cup slightly. "I didn't listen. And now, she's receiving excellent care," Janelle assured him. "And she's still here. It's never too late to make things right." Before Elias could respond, Voices echoed down the corridor. A group of people in expensive suits approached, their whispers carrying in the quiet space. "We need those shares secured before she stabilizes. The board meeting tomorrow. If she's incapacitated." Janelle watched as Elias's face drained of color. His breathing quickened again, panic rising in his eyes as his relatives advanced like vultures circling their prey. "Miss Brooks," he said quietly, desperately, reaching for her arm. "Please, stay close." She nodded, understanding flowing between them without words. Sometimes people needed an anchor in their darkest moments, and if she could provide that, she would. The relatives were only a few feet away now, their expensive perfumes and colognes filling the air. Elias's hand tightened slightly on Janelle's arm, and she felt him lean closer. His breath brushed her ear as he whispered words that made her heart stop. "Pretend to be my wife." Janelle froze, her mind struggling to process his request as the group of suited relatives drew ever closer. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the hospital corridor too narrow. She could feel the warmth of Elias's hand through her scrubs, the slight tremor in his fingers betraying his continued distress despite his outward composure. The weight of his desperate request hung in the air between them, heavy with implications and complications she couldn't begin to unravel. Yet something in his voice, in the raw vulnerability she'd witnessed, made it impossible to simply walk away. She remained still, her heart pounding as she tried to understand how this quiet Tuesday night shift had led to such an unexpected moment. The clicking of expensive shoes against linoleum grew louder, and the whispers about shares and board meetings continued to echo off the sterile walls. Time seemed to slow down as Janelle stood there, caught between her natural instinct to help and the magnitude of what Elias Hartwell had just asked of her. In the harsh hospital lighting, she could see every detail of his face, the slight crease between his brows, the tightness around his mouth, and most tellingly, the plea in his eyes that spoke of something far deeper than a simple business matter. This was about protection, about finding an ally in a moment when he felt completely alone. Their brief connection hung suspended in that moment, as fragile and vital as a heartbeat, waiting for her response while his relatives drew ever closer to where they stood. Janelle's heart thundered in her chest as she stared at Elias, certain she must have misheard him. The hospital corridor's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his tense features. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" she whispered, taking a small step back. Elias glanced nervously at his approaching relatives before leaning in again. "Please," he said, his voice barely audible. "I need you to pretend to be my wife. Just for a little while." "Mr. Hartwell, I don't understand. Call me Elias," he interrupted, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "The doctors. They've been monitoring my mother's responses. When they mentioned me during their assessments, she became agitated. But then..." He paused, swallowing hard. She had a moment of clarity. She started talking about how she always wanted me to find a good woman, someone kind who would help me be better than my father. Janelle shook her head, her nursing assistant badge feeling suddenly heavy against her scrubs. "I'm just a nursing assistant, Mr. Hart. Elias, I can't participate in deceiving a patient. It wouldn't be right." "You don't understand," he pressed, his eyes darting towards the group of relatives who were now conferring with a doctor at the end of the hallway. "When she thinks I'm finally settled, finally happy, it's the only time she's truly lucid. The doctor said these windows of clarity might be all we have left." The weight of his words settled over Janelle like a heavy blanket. She could see the pain etched in every line of his face, the desperate need to make things right before it was too late. "Your family?" she began, gesturing toward the suited figures. "They're vultures. he said flatly. They've been trying to get control of her shares in the company for years. If they catch her in a confused state. He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. Janelle opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a familiar voice called out to her. "Ms. Brooks?" The hospital's social worker, Mrs. Chen, was approaching with a concerned expression. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Janelle glanced apologetically at Elias before stepping aside with Mrs. Chen, who held out an official-looking envelope. "This arrived at the nurse's station for you," Mrs. Chen said softly. "I recognized the law firm's name on the letterhead, and given your situation with your grandmother's estate." Janelle's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Her grandmother's house, the only home she'd ever known, the place where she'd learned to bake cookies and say her prayers, where she'd cared for her grandmother in her final days, had been tied up in legal complications since her passing 3 months ago. Breaking the seal with unsteady fingers, Janelle scanned the contents. Her heart sank with each line she read. There was an issue with the deed transfer, something about missing documentation and potential claims from distant relatives. The house she'd grown up in, the one place that still held her grandmother's presence, could be taken away. The letter crumpled slightly in her grip as she tried to maintain her composure. She was vaguely aware of Elias watching her from a few feet away, his own family drama temporarily forgotten as he observed her distress. "I'm so sorry, dear," Mrs. Chen said, patting her arm. "If there's anything we can do—" Janelle nodded numbly, barely registering when the social worker walked away. She stood there in the harsh hospital lighting, the letter's words swimming before her eyes, until she felt a gentle touch on her arm. "Is everything all right?" Elias's voice was soft, genuinely concerned despite his own troubles. She looked up at him, trying to blink back tears. "My grandmother's house. There are some legal issues. I might lose it." Understanding flickered across his face. He was quiet for a moment, his hand still resting lightly on her arm. Then he spoke, his words careful and measured. "I have connections with some of the best real estate attorneys in the city," he said. "I could help you sort this out, if you'd be willing to help me with my situation." Janelle stared at him, the implications of his offer clear. The practical part of her mind warned against such an arrangement. It was unethical, complicated, potentially dangerous. But another part of her thought about her grandmother's house, filled with memories and love, the only piece of home she had left. She thought about Elias's mother, lying in a hospital bed, with only brief moments of clarity left to reconcile with her son. The letter crinkled in her hands as she looked up at Elias, his expression a mixture of hope and resignation, as though he already expected her to refuse. The suited relatives were still hovering at the end of the hallway, their whispered conversations about shares and voting rights carrying faintly through the air. "I could lose everything," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "So could I," he replied, his voice equally soft. "Not the money or the company, I don't care about those, but this might be my last chance to make things right with my mother, to be the son she always wanted me to be." The fluorescent lights continued their relentless buzzing overhead as Janelle stood at this unexpected crossroads, the weight of both their situations pressing down on her. Elias waited patiently, his hand having fallen away from her arm, giving her space to make her decision. She looked down at the letter once more, then at her badge, thinking about everything she'd been taught about ethics and responsibility. But she also thought about her grandmother's words about helping others in their time of need, about how sometimes the right path wasn't always the obvious one. The relatives at the end of the hall were beginning to move in their direction again, their expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. Elias tensed beside her, his carefully maintained composure threatening to crack under the pressure of their approach. She turned to face him fully, clutching the letter close to her chest like a shield. His eyes met hers, and in them she could see both the powerful businessman he was supposed to be and the vulnerable son he truly was in this moment. He reached out tentatively, his fingers barely brushing her arm, a gentle reminder of his offer to help, but only if she agreed to this complicated arrangement. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast stark shadows in the small supply alcove as Janelle's hands shook, making the papers tremble as she read through them again. Her grandmother's house, the modest two-bedroom home on Maple Street, where she'd learned to bake cookies and say her evening prayers, was in serious trouble. 3 days, she whispered, her voice catching. Just 3 days before they start foreclosure. Elias stood a respectful distance away, his tall frame blocking most of the corridor view, giving her privacy while still staying close. His expensive suit looked rumpled now, evidence of the long hours he'd spent pacing the hospital halls. The legal fees, Janelle continued, more to herself than to him, doing mental calculations that made her stomach twist. Even with her savings, she wouldn't have enough, not nearly enough. I meant what I said. Elias spoke softly, his deep voice gentle but firm. I have connections to the best real estate attorneys in the city. They can stop this immediately. He paused, then added with careful precision, if you agree to help me with my mother. Janelle lowered the papers, looking up at him. In the harsh lighting, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. You want me to pretend to be your wife? Yes. He didn't sugarcoat it or try to make it sound better than it was. Until my mother stabilizes, until I can ensure my family doesn't take advantage of her condition to seize control of her shares. And in exchange, you'll help save my grandmother's house. The words felt strange in her mouth, like she was negotiating something forbidden. I'll have my legal team start work tonight. The house will be secure by tomorrow afternoon. His certainty, the casual way he could promise such a thing, reminded her of just how powerful he really was. Janelle pressed her hand against the cool wall, steadying herself. It's wrong, she whispered. Lying to your mother. It's wrong to let my family strip her of everything while she's vulnerable. He countered, stepping closer. They're vultures, waiting for any sign of weakness. But my mother... His voice softened. She only finds peace when she believes I'm happy, settled, with someone kind. The weight of the decision pressed down on Janelle's shoulders. Her grandmother had always taught her that honesty was sacred, that lies would eat away at your soul. But she'd also taught her about protecting family, about keeping safe the things that mattered most. Janelle's voice trembled. If I agree, what exactly would this involve? Elias straightened, his business persona settling over him like a familiar coat. You would need to move into my home, tonight. Tonight. The word came out as a shocked whisper. But that's necessary. He cut in firmly. If we're to maintain this story, it needs to be consistent. My family will investigate. They'll watch. Everything must appear genuine. Before Janelle could process the magnitude of what he was suggesting, quick footsteps approached their alcove. A nurse, Jessica from the evening shift, appeared, slightly breathless. Mr. Hartwell, your mother's awake. She's lucid. The change in Elias was immediate. His shoulders tensed, his eyes widening with a mixture of hope and fear. He turned to Janelle, extending his hand. Please, he said softly. Come with me. In a daze, Janelle found herself walking beside him, her practical nursing shoes silent next to his expensive leather ones. They reached Margaret Hartwell's private room, where the monitors beeped steadily in the dimmed light. Margaret lay propped against white pillows, her silver hair neat despite her condition, an elegant woman even in illness. Her eyes, bright and alert, fixed immediately on her son. "Elias," she breathed, her face lighting up. Then her gaze shifted to Janelle, and something knowing flickered in her expression. "Mother," Elias said, his voice gentle in a way Janelle hadn't heard before. "I want you to meet someone very special." His hand found Janelle's lower back, guiding her forward. "This is Janelle, my wife." Janelle's heart pounded so hard she was sure the monitors would pick it up, but Margaret's smile grew even warmer, her pale hand reaching out. "A blessing," she whispered, her fingers closing around Janelle's. "I've prayed so long for him to find someone with a kind heart." The genuine joy in Margaret's face made Janelle's guilt sharper, but she forced herself to smile, to squeeze the frail hand gently. "It's wonderful to meet you," she managed. They sat with Margaret for several minutes, Elias doing most of the talking while Janelle tried to look natural, to play the part of a loving wife. She noticed how Margaret's eyes kept returning to her, filled with such hope and happiness that it made her chest ache. When Margaret's eyelids began to droop, Elias stood, pressing a kiss to his mother's forehead. He led Janelle back into the corridor, his hand still steady at her back. Away from his mother's room, Elias turned to face her, his expression serious. "Your shift ends at 6 o'clock in the morning, correct?" Janelle nodded, still somewhat dazed by everything that had happened. "Pack whatever you need for now. When your shift ends at dawn, we're leaving together." His voice was quiet, but left no room for argument. "My driver will be waiting to take us home." The word home hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Janelle clutched her grandmother's papers tighter, knowing she had just stepped onto a path that would change everything. In just a few hours, she would leave this familiar hospital corridor for a world she couldn't even imagine, all to save the only home she'd ever known. The night shift crawled toward its end as Janelle moved through her final rounds with mechanical precision. Her mind kept drifting to the weight of her grandmother's paperwork in her locker, to Elias's intense gaze, to the impossible arrangement she'd agreed to. When the clock finally struck 6 o'clock in the morning, her hands trembled as she gathered her belongings. The early November air bit at her cheeks as she drove home in her old sedan. The sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the edges of darkness in soft grays and pale blues. Her apartment building stood quiet and familiar, its brick facade weathered but dignified, much like her grandmother had been. Inside her small two-bedroom apartment, the heating system hummed steadily, trying to chase away the morning chill. Janelle stood in the entryway for a moment, letting the familiar scents wash over her, the lingering traces of vanilla air freshener her grandmother had always loved, the subtle mustiness of old books lining the shelves. "What am I doing, Grandma?" she whispered to the empty space. Moving to her bedroom, Janelle pulled out a modest overnight bag from under her bed. Her hands hesitated over each item as she packed. A few changes of clothes, her toiletries, the small photo of her grandmother that usually sat on her nightstand. She chose everything carefully, not wanting to appear presumptuous about the arrangement's duration. In the bathroom, she caught her reflection in the mirror, her dark eyes showing the fatigue of the night shift, her plus-size frame wrapped in practical nursing scrubs. What would Elias's wealthy world make of her? The thought made her stomach tighten. Before leaving, Janelle walked through each room one last time. In the kitchen, she touched the worn countertop, where she'd watched her grandmother roll out biscuit dough countless Sunday mornings. The living room still held the indent in her grandmother's favorite armchair, where she'd sat reading her Bible every evening. Each corner held memories that wrapped around Janelle's heart like gentle hands. "I'm doing this for you," she murmured, touching the doorframe on her way out. "To keep our home safe. The sleek black SUV waited at the curb, its engine purring quietly in the dawn light. Elias stood beside it, his tall frame wrapped in an expensive wool coat. Despite having been up all night, he looked impeccable, though Janelle noticed the tension in his jaw, the slight darkness under his eyes. As she approached, he moved forward to meet her. "Good morning," he said softly, taking her bag before she could protest. His hand brushed her elbow as he guided her towards the vehicle, the touch surprisingly gentle for someone so formidable. The interior was warm and smelled of rich leather. As they pulled away from the curb, Janelle watched her apartment building shrink in the side mirror until it disappeared completely. Beside her, Elias cleared his throat. "We need to discuss some details," he said, his voice low and measured. "My family will ask questions. We need our story to align perfectly." Janelle nodded, turning to face him. "Tell me what I need to know." "We met 6 months ago at a charity gala for the hospital. You were there representing the nursing staff." He spoke efficiently, like someone used to running meetings. "We kept our relationship private because of my family's tendency to interfere. We married 3 weeks ago in a small, private ceremony." 3 weeks, Janelle repeated, committing it to memory. "My mother's favorite flowers are gardenias. We had them in the bouquet." His eyes remained fixed on the passing streets, but his voice softened slightly. "She'll want to know that detail." As they drove through awakening neighborhoods, Elias continued outlining their fabricated history. Janelle absorbed every detail, asking careful questions about his family members, their likely reactions, the proper ways to address them. With each passing minute, the weight of what they were attempting settled more heavily on her shoulders. The streets gradually transformed from modest homes to increasingly grand estates until they turned onto a private drive lined with ancient oaks. The Hartwell mansion appeared through the morning mist like something from a dream, all stone and sweeping archways with manicured gardens stretching in every direction. Janelle's breath caught in her throat. "It's enormous. It's too much," Elias said quietly, something like distaste coloring his words. "But it's been in the family for generations." As they pulled up to the main entrance, Janelle noticed several staff members already gathered. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but their eyes lingered on her with obvious curiosity and what looked like judgment. She felt every pound of her weight, every wrinkle in her clothes from the long night shift. Elias must have sensed her discomfort. As they exited the vehicle, he stepped close, his arms sliding around her shoulders in a gesture that looked natural to observers, but felt carefully calculated. Yet there was genuine warmth in the slight squeeze he gave her shoulder, a silent message of support. "Welcome home," he said, loud enough for the staff to hear. The mansion's foyer soared above them, all marble and crystal and old-world grandeur. Janelle's practical nursing shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floor. Such a small sound, but it seemed to echo in the vast space. Elias's arm remained steady around her as they moved forward, their steps in sync, two people bound together by necessity and secrets, walking deeper into their shared deception. A grandfather clock somewhere struck 7 times, its chimes reverberating through the morning quiet. Through tall windows, sunrise finally broke over the horizon, painting the foyer in soft golden light. It caught the crystal chandelier above them, scattering diamonds of light across the walls like scattered hopes, beautiful but fragile. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, led Janelle through corridors lined with oil paintings and antique vases that probably cost more than she made in a year. Her sensible shoes sank into plush carpets as they climbed a sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor. "This will be your room, Mrs. Hartwell," Mrs. Chen said, opening a door to reveal a space bigger than Janelle's entire apartment. The words Mrs. Hartwell made her stomach flutter with anxiety. Soft morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a king-sized bed draped in cream-colored linens. A sitting area featured 2 velvet armchairs and a marble fireplace. The adjoining bathroom gleamed with white marble and gold fixtures. "Mr. Hartwell's suite is just down the hall," Mrs. Chen added, her expression carefully neutral. "Will you need help unpacking?" "No, thank you," Janelle replied softly. "I can manage." After Mrs. Chen left, Janelle sat on the edge of the bed, her small overnight bag looking out of place against the luxury surrounding her. She had barely started to unzip it when a gentle knock sounded at the door. Elias stood in the hallway, his tie loosened slightly. "Would you join me for breakfast in the library? We need to discuss some things." The library turned out to be a 2-story room with walls of leather-bound books and comfortable reading nooks. A small table had been set near one of the windows, complete with coffee, fresh fruit, and pastries. "Please, eat something," Elias said, noting her hesitation. "It's been a long night for both of us." Janelle selected a croissant, trying not to feel self-conscious as she took small, careful bites. Elias poured coffee for them both, then pulled out a small notebook. "We need to get our timeline straight," he said, his voice businesslike but not unkind. "The story of how we met needs to be detailed enough to be believable." They spent the next hour crafting their false history, the charity gala where they first met. How Janelle had supposedly caught his eye with her quiet grace and genuine care for patients, their private courtship, always away from prying eyes, the small wedding 3 weeks ago with gardenias in the bouquet for his mother. "Your favorite color?" Elias asked, making notes. "Purple," Janelle replied. "Deep purple, like sunset." "Our first date?" "A quiet dinner at La Maison, followed by a walk in Sterling Gardens." They were reviewing honeymoon details when Elias's phone rang. His expression hardened as he checked the screen. "Uncle Richard," he said tightly before answering. "Yes." Janelle watched as Elias's jaw clenched tighter with each passing moment. His knuckles whitened around the phone. "Of course," he finally said, his tone clipped. "We'll be there." He ended the call and set the phone down carefully. Too carefully, like he was restraining himself from throwing it. "He wants to meet you," Elias explained, running a hand through his hair. "Today, at the hospital. He says the family needs to evaluate whether you're suitable." The word suitable hung in the air like poison. Janelle saw decades of family judgment in Elias's eyes, old wounds that had never quite healed. "We don't have to go," she offered quietly. "We do." Elias stood and paced to the window. "If we refuse, they'll only become more suspicious. And we need to be at the hospital anyway, to check on Mother." Janelle returned to her room to freshen up, aware that her simple blouse and slacks were hardly what the Hartwell family would consider appropriate. But as she looked in the mirror, she remembered her grandmother's words. "Your worth isn't in what you wear, child. It's in how you carry yourself." She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Her clothes might be simple, but her dignity was her own. The hospital corridor seemed different in daylight, but no less tense. Uncle Richard waited by the nurse's station, his expensive suit and perfectly groomed silver hair marking him as clearly as a crown would have. "Ah, the happy couple," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. His gaze swept over Janelle dismissively. "How interesting that Elias kept you hidden for so long." Before either could respond, a nurse emerged from Margaret Hartwell's room. "She's awake and quite clear-headed," she announced. "She's asking for her son and daughter-in-law." Margaret's face lit up when they entered. "Janelle, dear!" she called out, reaching for her hand. "Come closer where I can see you properly." Her fingers were cool, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "You're perfect for my boy. I knew it the moment I saw you." Behind them, Uncle Richard made a small sound of disapproval. Other family members who had gathered whispered among themselves, their murmurs like angry wasps. Elias leaned close to Janelle, his breath warm against her ear. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. "The real battle starts now." As Margaret happily asked about their wedding, Janelle caught fragments of a whispered conversation near the door. Uncle Richard's voice was low but clear. "Enough. We need those papers signed before she fully recovers. The old woman's too sharp right now. We'll wait until evening when she's tired. Bring the documents then." Janelle's heart sank. She had thought this deception would be brief, just long enough for Margaret to stabilize. But now she understood. This was going to be a much longer performance than she'd bargained for, and the stakes were far higher than she'd realized. The drive back to the mansion felt heavier than the morning's journey. Shadows stretched long across the manicured lawn as Elias's SUV pulled through the gates. Neither spoke until they were inside, standing in the grand foyer with its marble floors and towering ceilings. "I need to be honest with you," Elias said, loosening his tie. "This situation, it's going to be more complicated than I initially suggested." Janelle wrapped her arms around herself, her nursing scrubs from the previous night feeling out of place against the mansion's elegance. "What do you mean?" "My family won't give up easily. We need to maintain this." He gestured between them. "This facade, not just for days, it could be weeks." Janelle's breath caught. "Weeks? I know it's asking too much." Elias ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up its usual perfect style. "But you heard them today. They're waiting for any weakness, any crack in our story." The weight of the commitment settled over Janelle. Weeks of pretending, weeks of living this elaborate lie. But then she remembered Margaret's warm smile, the way she'd squeezed Janelle's hand with such hope. "Okay," she said softly. "I understand." Relief flickered across Elias's face. "Thank you." He glanced at his watch. "Have you eaten? The kitchen staff leaves at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays." "I could cook something," Janelle offered. "If that's allowed." A small smile tugged at his lips. "It's my kitchen. We can do whatever we want." The kitchen was enormous, all gleaming stainless steel and pristine countertops. Janelle opened the industrial-sized refrigerator, surveying its contents. "How about something simple? Chicken stir-fry?" "I wouldn't know where to start," Elias admitted, looking almost sheepish. "I don't cook. You can help me chop vegetables." Janelle pulled out carrots, bell peppers, and snap peas. "Even billionaires can learn to use a knife." To her surprise, Elias rolled up his sleeves without protest. She showed him how to hold the knife properly, guiding his hands as he somewhat clumsily sliced carrots into uneven chunks. "My grandmother would say those are rustic cuts," Janelle said, trying not to laugh. "Was she a cook?" "The best." Janelle's voice softened with memory as she seasoned the chicken. "She could make anything taste amazing, even when we barely had groceries. She'd say, 'Love is the secret ingredient that makes everything better.'" Elias concentrated on his pepper cutting. "She sounds wonderful." She was. Janelle heated oil in a pan. "She raised me after my parents died, taught me everything important: cooking, faith, dignity. Her house, it's not just a building, it's every memory I have of her." The sizzle of chicken hitting the pan filled the silence. Elias handed her his chopped vegetables, then leaned against the counter, watching her cook. "I never cooked with my mother," he said quietly. "There were always staff for that. Everything in our house was about appearances, about maintaining the Hartwell standard." His voice turned bitter. No mistakes allowed. No weaknesses shown. Janelle stirred the vegetables into the pan. That sounds lonely. It was. He reached for plates. The wrong cabinet at first, then the right one. Mother tried to shield me when she could, but Father was strict. Everything had to be perfect. My grades, my clothes, my weight. The last word came out barely above a whisper. Janelle glanced at him, seeing something vulnerable in his usually controlled expression. I was a chubby kid, he continued, staring at the plates. Father couldn't stand it. Put me on diets starting at age 8, hired personal trainers, made me weigh myself every morning while he watched. Janelle's heart ached. That's cruel. That was normal in our world? Elias shrugged, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed how much it still affected him. Mother would sneak me cookies sometimes, when he was away on business, little acts of rebellion. Janelle divided the stir-fry between their plates, adding extra vegetables to his without comment. They sat at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room, their knees almost touching on the adjacent stools. This is good, Elias said after his first bite. Really good. Grandmother's secret ingredient. Janelle reminded him with a small smile. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kitchen's warm lighting making everything feel more intimate than it should. Janelle found herself studying his profile when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows that never quite smoothed out. Tell me more about your grandmother, Elias said suddenly. What else did she teach you? Janelle told him about Sunday afternoons baking cookies, about learning to tend the small garden behind the house, about sitting on the porch swing while her grandmother read from her worn Bible. In return, Elias shared rare, happy memories, his mother teaching him piano, secret trips for ice cream, the way she'd sing him to sleep when he was small. The kitchen clock struck 10 o'clock, its chimes echoing through the quiet house. Janelle stifled a yawn, suddenly aware of how long she'd been awake. We should get some rest, Elias said, standing to help her clear the plates. Tomorrow will be another long day. They walked upstairs together, stopping where the hallway split. His master suite to the left, her guest room to the right. Thank you, he said softly. For dinner, for listening, for everything. Good night, Elias. Janelle replied, her voice equally quiet. In her room, Janelle changed into soft pajamas and slipped between expensive sheets. But sleep wouldn't come. She lay there, watching moonlight paint patterns on the ceiling, her mind whirling with the day's events. This arrangement had seemed simpler yesterday, a straightforward exchange of favors. But now, after sharing meals and memories, after seeing the pain behind Elias's careful facade, after feeling his mother's hopeful grip on her hand, everything felt more complicated. She rolled onto her side, trying to quiet her thoughts. But in the darkness, one truth remained clear. Her heart was getting tangled in ways she hadn't expected, and she wasn't sure how to untangle it without someone getting hurt. Morning light crept through the heavy silk curtains, casting delicate patterns across Janelle's face. She blinked awake slowly, taking a moment to remember where she was. The guest room's elegant wallpaper and crystal chandelier seemed almost dreamlike in the soft dawn glow. She dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, a navy dress that her grandmother had helped her pick out last year. The fabric hugged her curves comfortingly, like a familiar embrace. After smoothing her hair and applying light makeup, she stepped into the hallway. The smell of fresh coffee led her toward the kitchen. She found Elias in the breakfast nook, already impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. His fingers moved rapidly across his phone screen, while his other hand cradled a steaming mug. "Good morning," he said, glancing up. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept well. "There's fresh coffee in the kitchen." Janelle poured herself a cup, adding a splash of cream. When she returned, Elias had set his phone down and was watching her with an unreadable expression. "I have a meeting downtown this morning," he said. "Would you come with me? We should be seen together in public, establish our story more firmly." "Of course." Janelle sat across from him, warming her hands on the coffee mug. "What kind of meeting?" "Investment review at the main office." He rubbed his temples. "Usually tedious, but necessary. The board likes regular updates, especially with mother's condition making headlines." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence before heading out to the waiting SUV. The morning was crisp, autumn leaves skittering across the driveway. Elias held the car door for her, then slid in beside her. As they drove through the awakening city, Janelle noticed Elias's hands fidgeting in his lap. His usual composed demeanor seemed to be slipping. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, still staring out the window, he spoke. "I hate being in the papers. The scrutiny, the expectations. It never stops." Janelle waited, sensing there was more. "When I was younger," he continued, his voice tight, "every photo had to be perfect," Father insisted. "But I struggled with my weight, especially as a teenager. Food was comfort, control, the one thing I could choose for myself." He turned to look at her, vulnerability clear in his eyes. The media was merciless. Every pound gained or lost made headlines. Hartwell Ayres' Battle of the Bulge. Can't control his appetite or his company. I started binge eating in secret, then starving myself before public appearances. "Oh, Elias," Janelle breathed, her heart aching for the wounded boy beneath the successful man's exterior. "I got it under control eventually. Therapy, exercise, better coping mechanisms. But sometimes..." He clenched his jaw. "Sometimes I still feel like that fat kid trying to hide from the cameras." Without thinking, Janelle reached over and squeezed his hand. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, letting their fingers intertwine. The meeting itself passed in a blur of PowerPoint presentations and profit projections. Janelle sat quietly beside Elias, noting how the board members' gazes lingered on her with barely concealed judgment. She held her head high, remembering her grandmother's words about dignity. It was when they left the building that things went wrong. A group of paparazzi surged forward, cameras flashing like lightning. "Mr. Hartwell, is it true you married secretly?" "How long have you been together?" "What does your father think of your new wife?" Then came the crueler questions, aimed at Janelle. "How did you convince him to marry someone like you? Are you worried about fitting into the Hartwell image?" Elias's arm went around her immediately, pulling her close against his side. His body became a shield between her and the shouting photographers. "My wife's appearance is not up for discussion," he said, his voice cold with controlled fury. "If I see a single disparaging comment about her in print, I will personally ensure your publication never gets access to another Hartwell event." He guided her quickly to the waiting car, protecting her head as she ducked inside. The drive home was tense, both of them processing the ugly encounter. Back at the mansion, Elias asked the housekeeper to bring tea to the library. The room was cozy despite its grandeur, with a crackling fire chasing away the autumn chill. They sat close together on the leather sofa, steam rising from their cups. "I'm sorry about that," Elias said finally. "The press. They can be brutal. It's not your fault." Janelle cradled her tea, letting its warmth seep into her bones. "Thank you for defending me." "Of course I defended you. You're..." He paused, something shifting in his expression. You're the first person in a long time who's just listened. No judgment, no agenda. Just understood. The firelight played across his features, softening them. Janelle found herself studying the way it highlighted the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the gentle curve of his mouth when it wasn't set in its usual stern line. They sat there as their tea grew cold, sharing the quiet moment, both aware that something between them had changed. What had started as a simple arrangement was becoming something neither of them had expected, a connection that felt more real with each passing hour. The crackling fire and gentle tick of the library clock were the only sounds as they sat together, lost in thought about how a pretense was slowly teaching them truths about themselves and each other that they never expected to learn. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the mansion's marble floors as Janelle made her way downstairs. She found Elias in his usual spot by the kitchen island, phone pressed to his ear. But today was different. His face was lit up with relief. "Yes, Dr. Matthews, I understand. We'll be there within the hour. Thank you." He ended the call and turned to Janelle, a rare smile softening his features. "Mother's showing significant improvement. She's been asking for you all morning." Janelle's heart warmed at the news. "Really? That's wonderful. She keeps telling the nurses about her lovely daughter-in-law." He paused, color rising in his cheeks. "I think you've made quite an impression." They drove to the hospital in comfortable silence, the autumn scenery flashing past their windows in bursts of red and gold. When they arrived, the sterile hospital corridors felt less threatening than before, brightened by hope. Mrs. Hartwell was sitting up in bed when they entered, her silver hair neatly combed and her eyes clear. She reached for Janelle immediately, her thin fingers surprisingly strong as they clasped Janelle's hand. "There you are, dear," she said, her voice warm but tired. "I was beginning to think they were keeping you away from me." "Never," Janelle assured her, settling into the chair beside the bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, now that you're here." Mrs. Hartwell's gaze moved between Janelle and Elias, who stood watchfully nearby. "You know, I've been worried about my boy for so long. All those years focused on nothing but work, letting his father's expectations weigh him down." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "Mother, you don't need to—" "Hush now," she said firmly. "Let me speak while I have my wits about me." She turned back to Janelle, squeezing her hand. "Promise me you'll take care of my son. He needs someone gentle like you, someone who sees past all the walls he's built." Janelle felt tears prick at her eyes, guilt mixing with genuine emotion. "I promise," she whispered, meaning it more than she should. They stayed for an hour, listening to Mrs. Hartwell's stories and watching her face light up whenever she spoke about Elias as a child. When she finally began to tire, they said their goodbyes, promising to return soon. In the car, Elias was quieter than usual, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. "There's a charity gala this weekend. The Hartwell Foundation's annual fundraiser for children's hospitals." Janelle's stomach tightened. "Oh? I'd like you to come with me." He glanced at her, then back at the road. "As my wife, you'd be expected to attend, but more than that, I want you there." She twisted her hands in her lap. "Elias, I don't know. Those kinds of events, they're not meant for someone like me." He pulled the car over suddenly, turning to face her fully. "What do you mean, someone like you?" "You know what I mean," she said quietly. I don't look like the women who usually attend these things. I'd stick out." "You're right," he said, his voice firm. "You would stick out, because you have more genuine grace and dignity than anyone else in that room." His expression softened. "Please come. Let me show you that you deserve to be seen, exactly as you are." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Slowly, she nodded. That evening, Elias arranged for a private boutique to bring a selection of gowns to the mansion. The living room was transformed into an impromptu fitting area, with racks of beautiful dresses in every color imaginable. Mr. Hartwell specifically requested pieces that would complement your natural beauty, the boutique owner said kindly, helping Janelle browse through the options. He was very particular about that. They settled on 3 gowns to try on. The first 2 were nice, but didn't feel quite right. The third, though. When Janelle stepped out of the makeshift changing area, even the boutique staff gasped. The dress was a deep midnight blue that seemed to shimmer with every movement. The cut was elegant and flattering, with careful draping that enhanced her curves instead of hiding them. Small crystals caught the light like stars scattered across fabric. Elias, who had been answering emails in the corner, looked up. His phone slipped from his fingers, forgotten. "Janelle," he breathed, standing slowly. "You look—" She shifted nervously. "Is it too much?" "No," he said quickly. "No, it's perfect. You're perfect." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Janelle felt her cheeks flush, and Elias quickly looked away, clearing his throat. "We'll take this one," he told the boutique owner, his voice slightly hoarse. After the staff packed up and left, Janelle and Elias found themselves alone in the hallway. The awkwardness of the moment hung between them until Elias suddenly chuckled. "What?" Janelle asked, feeling herself smile in response. "I just realized I dropped my phone when I saw you in that dress. Completely shattered the screen." Janelle laughed too, the tension breaking. "Well, at least you can afford a new one." "Worth it," he said, his eyes twinkling. "So, we're doing this? The gala?" She nodded, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "We're doing this." They stood there smiling at each other, both aware that something had shifted between them. The pretense of their arrangement felt less like an act with each passing moment, and neither quite knew what to do with that realization. The approaching gala loomed large in both their minds, but somehow, standing there in the warm light of the hallway, sharing a gentle laugh, it didn't seem quite so scary anymore. They would face it together, whatever together was beginning to mean. 2 days passed in a blur of preparation, and suddenly the evening of the gala arrived. Janelle stood in front of her bedroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The midnight blue gown caught the light perfectly, making her skin glow. Her hair had been styled in elegant waves, and subtle makeup enhanced her natural features. Her grandmother's pearl earrings, her one touch of home, completed the look. A soft knock at the door made her turn. "Come in," she called, smoothing her hands over the dress nervously. Helena Carter, the gala coordinator Elias had hired to help prepare them, stepped inside. "Oh my," she breathed, breaking into a warm smile. "You look absolutely stunning, Mrs. Hartwell." The false name still felt strange, but Janelle managed a shy smile. "Thank you. I'm just worried I'll do something wrong." "Nonsense," Helena said firmly. "Remember what we practiced? Small sips of champagne, knife and fork from the outside in, and most importantly, hold your head high. You belong there just as much as anyone else." Janelle took a deep breath, nodding. She'd spent hours with Helena learning proper etiquette and social protocols for high society events. The older woman had been surprisingly kind, never once making Janelle feel inferior. "Mr. Hartwell is waiting downstairs," Helena added with a knowing look. "Shall we?" Gathering her courage, Janelle followed Helena into the hallway. At the top of the grand staircase, she paused, gripping the banister. Below, Elias stood in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, checking his watch. At the sound of her heels on the marble, he looked up. His reaction made every moment of preparation worth it. His eyes widened, lips parting slightly as he stared. For several heartbeats, he seemed unable to speak. "You look—" he finally managed, then shook his head, starting over. "Janelle, you're breathtaking." She descended carefully, focusing on not tripping. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she said softly, taking in how handsome he looked in his formal wear. When she reached him, Elias took her hand, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." The drive to the venue was quiet, filled with anticipation. Their chauffeur navigated through the city's evening traffic, while Janelle watched lights blur past her window, trying to calm her racing heart. "Remember," Elias said softly, "just stay close to me. We'll get through this together." The grand hotel hosting the gala loomed ahead, its entrance lined with photographers and reporters. Their car pulled up to the red carpet, and Janelle's breath caught. Elias squeezed her hand. "I've got you." He stepped out first, then turned to help her from the car. Camera flashes exploded around them as Elias placed his hand protectively at the small of her back. Janelle focused on putting one foot in front of the other, chin lifted just as Helena had taught her. The massive ballroom took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow sparkles across marble floors, and elegant floral arrangements adorned every table. A string quartet played softly from a raised platform, their music floating through the air like silk. As they entered, conversations stuttered to a halt. Heads turned, whispers erupted, and Janelle felt hundreds of eyes examining her. Elias's hand tightened over hers, and he guided her forward with quiet confidence. "Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you uncomfortable," he murmured. "You outshine everyone here." The gala coordinator appeared, smoothly inserting herself between them and the staring crowd. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, your table is this way. Dinner will be served in 30 minutes. They followed Helena through the crowd, stopping occasionally as Elias introduced Janelle to business associates and social acquaintances. Some were polite, others barely concealed their judgment, but Elias never left her side. "Would you like to dance?" he asked after they'd made their initial rounds. The quartet had begun playing a slow waltz. Janelle hesitated. "I'm not very good at—" "Just follow my lead," he said, already drawing her toward the dance floor. His hand settled on her waist, warm and steady. She placed her hand on his shoulder, and he began moving them in gentle circles. They'd practiced this too, but somehow it felt different now, more real. "Everyone's watching us," she whispered. "Let them watch." His voice was soft but fierce. "Let them see how beautiful you are, how graceful. Let them see that their narrow minds and prejudices mean nothing." Under the sparkling chandeliers, they moved together as if they'd been dancing for years. Janelle gradually relaxed into his arms, allowing herself to enjoy the moment. "Can I tell you something?" Elias asked after a while, his voice so quiet she had to lean closer to hear him. "Of course. I've attended these galas for 15 years, he said, always alone, always keeping everyone at arm's length. This is the first time I've actually enjoyed one." Janelle's heart skipped. "Because you have someone to share the burden. Because I have you to share it with." He met her eyes. I wish this didn't have to be pretend." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Janelle's pulse quickened, and she struggled to remember this was all an arrangement, despite how real it felt. After several dances, Elias noticed her growing tired. "Would you like some air?" She nodded gratefully, and he led her toward glass doors that opened onto a wide balcony. The night air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of the hotel's rooftop garden. City lights stretched out below them like fallen stars. "Thank you," she said softly, "for making me feel like I belong here tonight." "You do belong." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Janelle, you belong anywhere you choose to be. Never let anyone make you think differently." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city twinkle. For a moment, everything felt perfect, until a flash of light caught Janelle's attention. In the distance, she glimpsed several photographers with long lens cameras capturing their private moment. Elias noticed too, his jaw tightening. "I'm sorry, I should have known they'd be watching." "It's okay," she said, though her stomach churned at the thought of what tomorrow's tabloids might say. "We knew what we were getting into." He looked like he wanted to say more, but Helena appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hartwell, the foundation board would like a word." Elias nodded reluctantly. "Will you be all right for a moment?" "Go," Janelle assured him. "I'll be fine." She watched him leave, then turned back to the city view, trying not to think about the cameras still clicking in the darkness. Tomorrow's headlines would probably be cruel, but for now, she chose to remember the magic of dancing under crystal chandeliers with a man who made her feel truly seen. Sunlight crept through the mansion's windows, but the morning's peace shattered when Elias's phone started buzzing non-stop. Janelle was just finishing her coffee in the kitchen when he stormed in, his face ashen. "It's bad," he said, his voice tight. "My cousin Sabrina, she's written an article." Janelle's stomach dropped as he held out his phone. The headline screamed across the screen, "Hartwell heirs secret shame, the truth about his wife." Her hands trembled as she read. Sabrina's words were poison wrapped in fake concern. Sources close to the family are deeply worried about Elias Hartwell's sudden marriage to an overweight nursing assistant. Has the pressure of running the family empire driven him to be manipulated by an obvious gold digger? Photos from last night's charity gala show the stark reality. A desperate woman trying to pass herself off as Hartwell material, wearing borrowed finery that can't disguise her true nature. The article went on, each paragraph more cruel than the last. Sabrina had dug up details about Janelle's grandmother's house, twisting them into proof that she was using Elias for money. There were unflattering photos from the gala, carefully chosen angles that made Janelle look awkward and out of place. "I'm so sorry," Elias whispered. "Sabrina's always been vicious, but this—" Before he could finish, his phone rang. The hospital. Elias's face drained of color as he listened. "Mother saw the article," he said after hanging up. "She became so upset. She's had another collapse." Janelle pressed her hands to her mouth. "Oh no, no, no!" The mansion's front door burst open. Angry voices echoed through the halls, growing louder as Elias's relatives stormed toward the kitchen. Cousin Sabrina led the charge, her face a mask of false concern. "There you are," she said, eyes fixed on Janelle. "I hope you're satisfied with what you've done to this family." "That's enough," Elias snapped, but others were already joining in. "How dare you upset Margaret like this?" one aunt demanded. "We knew she was a fraud from the start." Another relative added, "The family name will be a laughingstock." Their voices overlapped, a hurricane of accusations and disgust. Janelle stood frozen, each word hitting like a physical blow. She caught glimpses of phones being held up, probably recording her humiliation for more articles. "Stop this!" Elias shouted, but his family pressed closer. "Choose now, Elias," Sabrina said coldly. "Your mother is in critical condition. Are you really going to let this person destroy everything?" Janelle couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in, the judging faces becoming a blur. Without a word, she turned and fled upstairs to her room. Her hands shook as she pulled out her suitcase. Tears splashed onto her clothes as she packed, barely seeing what she was doing. The cruel words from the article played over and over in her mind. Footsteps in the doorway made her turn. Elias stood there, looking lost. "Janelle, please. We can fix this." She shook her head. "Your mother is in the hospital because of me. Your family is right. I'm destroying everything. They're wrong. You're the best thing that's—" "Please," she whispered, "don't make this harder." He took a step forward, then stopped as more shouting erupted from downstairs. His family was calling for him, demanding his attention. The tension in his face showed how torn he was, trapped between duty and desire. "I have to check on my mother," he said finally, his voice cracking. "But please, wait for me to return. We'll figure this out together." But Janelle knew she couldn't stay. As soon as he left, she finished packing and slipped out through the service entrance. The taxi ride to her grandmother's house passed in a blur of tears and regret. The house stood silent, exactly as she'd left it days ago. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light as she stepped inside. Her grandmother's rocking chair sat empty, the Afghan still draped over one arm. Family photos smiled from the walls, reminding her of happier times. Janelle sank onto the old couch, not bothering to turn on any lights. The dimness matched her mood as tears rolled down her cheeks. Her grandmother had always taught her to hold her head high, to know her own worth. But now— "What was I thinking?" she whispered to the empty room. "How could I ever believe I belonged in their world?" The silence offered no answer. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the living room before leaving her in darkness again. Alone with her thoughts, Janelle hugged herself and cried quietly, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life by saying yes to Elias's plan. The cruel words from Sabrina's article echoed in her mind. Obvious gold digger, desperate woman, true nature. Each phrase stung anew, confirming her deepest fears about how the world saw her. The fact that she'd allowed herself to hope, to imagine even for a moment that she could be accepted in Elias's world, now seemed like a foolish dream. Her grandmother's house, once a sanctuary of love and acceptance, felt empty and cold. Dust-covered surfaces that used to shine with care, and shadows gathered in corners where warmth once lived. The contrast between this modest home and the gleaming mansion she'd just fled made everything feel even more surreal. As evening approached, Janelle remained curled on the couch, her tears finally spent, but her heart still aching. The memory of dancing with Elias under those crystal chandeliers now felt like a cruel joke, a brief glimpse of a fairy tale that was never meant to be hers. The hospital corridor felt colder than Elias remembered. His footsteps echoed against the polished floors as he made his way to his mother's room, his heart heavy with the day's events. The familiar antiseptic smell brought back memories of Janelle's first gentle approach, how she'd offered him water when he was falling apart. Now she was gone, and the emptiness in his chest felt overwhelming. Outside his mother's room, Dr. Chen waited with a patient chart. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, her expression serious. "Your mother has been asking for someone. She's quite insistent." Elias's stomach tightened. "How is she doing?" "Physically, she's stabilizing, but she keeps requesting the girl with the kind eyes. She means your wife, doesn't she? Janelle?" The word wife made his throat constrict. "Yes," he managed. Inside the room, Margaret Hartwell lay against white pillows, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. Her eyes opened as Elias approached, searching the space behind him. "Where's Janelle?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. "I need to tell her something important." Elias took his mother's hand, fighting back emotion. "She's not here right now, Mother. But I need her." Margaret's fingers tightened around his. She has such gentle hands, such kind eyes. The first time I saw her, I knew she was special. I know, Mother. She reminds me of how I used to be, before your father's family changed everything. Margaret's eyes grew distant. I should have been stronger then, should have protected you better from their expectations. Elias felt tears threatening. You did your best. No, she said firmly. I let them make you hard. But Janelle, she makes you soft again. I see it in your face when you look at her. The truth of his mother's words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered Janelle's quiet strength in the face of his family's cruelty, how she'd maintained her dignity even as they tried to tear her down. Please bring her back. Margaret whispered, She's good for you, Elias, the way she looks at you. That's real! His mother's words followed him out of the hospital, haunting him on the drive home. The mansion loomed before him, its windows dark and uninviting. Inside, the silence was deafening. No soft humming from the kitchen where Janelle liked to cook. No gentle laughter echoing down the halls. He wandered into the library where they'd spent that first morning planning their deception. Her coffee cup still sat on the side table, a faint lipstick mark on the rim. He picked it up, remembering how her hands had trembled as they created their false history. In the kitchen, dishes from their last meal together remained in the drying rack. She'd insisted on washing them by hand, claiming it helped her think. He'd stood beside her, drying each plate she handed him, their shoulders occasionally brushing in comfortable silence. Elias moved through the rooms like a ghost, everywhere finding traces of Janelle's brief presence. The throw pillow she'd always hugged while they talked. The novel she'd been reading, bookmark still in place. Each item seemed to mock him for his cowardice, for letting her walk away. Meanwhile, across town, Janelle moved through her grandmother's house with determined energy. She'd already dusted the living room and kitchen, trying to lose herself in the familiar motions. But memories of Elias kept intruding, his rare smile when she made him laugh, the gentle way he'd guided her through the gala crowd, how his eyes had softened when she wore that beautiful dress. She attacked the windows next, scrubbing with perhaps more force than necessary. The glass cleaner's sharp smell couldn't mask the lingering scent of her grandmother's favorite flowers in the curtains. Those same curtains had witnessed so many Sunday afternoons of wisdom shared over tea and cookies. Stand tall, baby, her grandmother used to say. Your worth isn't in what others see, it's in what you carry in your heart. Janelle paused, cloth halfway up the window. What would her grandmother say about this situation? About running away? The question followed her as she moved to the kitchen, sorting through old mail and newspapers. Her hands stilled when she found a photo stuck between magazines, her grandmother standing proud in front of this very house the day she'd finally paid off the mortgage. That same strength and dignity had shaped Janelle's childhood, teaching her to face life's challenges with grace. But thinking about dignity brought back memories of Elias defending her from the paparazzi, how he'd placed himself between her and their cruel cameras. He'd done it instinctively, as if protecting her was as natural as breathing. Back at the mansion, Elias stood before his bathroom mirror, tie loosened, jacket discarded. The face that stared back at him looked haunted. When had everything changed? When had this arrangement become so much more than pretense? He thought of Janelle's smile, not the polite one she wore for his family, but the real one that crinkled her eyes when something genuinely amused her. He remembered how she'd looked on the gala balcony, starlight in her hair, finally relaxed enough to share her dreams with him. The truth hit him with stunning clarity. Every morning he'd found excuses to seek her out. Every evening he'd lingered over dinner, not wanting their conversations to end. He'd memorized the sound of her footsteps, the way she hummed while reading, the gentle cadence of her voice when she spoke about her grandmother. "I love her," he whispered to his reflection, the words both terrifying and liberating. "I'm in love with her." His reflection offered no solution, but his heart raced with the admission. He loved her steadiness, her compassion, the way she saw through his carefully constructed walls. He loved how she treated everyone with equal kindness, from his mother to the mansion's staff. He loved her strength, not the showy kind his family valued, but the quiet power that came from knowing who she was and standing firm in that truth. The revelation left him gripping the sink's edge, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd lost. He'd asked her to pretend to be his wife, but somewhere along the way she'd become essential to his happiness. And now she was gone, driven away by the very family whose opinion he'd once valued above all else. The marble counter felt cold under his hands as he stared at himself, really seeing the man he'd become. The man who'd let the woman he loved walk away rather than stand up to his family's cruelty. The man who'd failed to protect what mattered most. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "The way she looks at you, that's real." Had he been too blind to see it? Too caught up in maintaining the lie to recognize the truth growing between them? The massive house creaked and settled around him, its emptiness a testament to everything he'd lost. Without Janelle's presence, it felt like nothing more than an expensive shell, devoid of the warmth and life she'd brought to every corner. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hartwell corporate offices, casting long shadows across the polished conference table. Elias straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and pushed open the heavy double doors. His family members looked up from their tablets and smartphones. Uncle Richard, 3 cousins, and 2 board members who might as well have been family given their decades of enabling the worst Hartwell tendencies. Their faces showed varying degrees of disdain and curiosity. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice," Elias said, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath his controlled exterior. He remained standing, hands resting on the back of his chair. Uncle Richard leaned back, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "If this is about that article, surely you understand we had to address the situation." "The situation." Elias's knuckles whitened against the chair. "You mean the deliberate character assassination of an innocent woman, the leaked photos, the coordinated media attack?" "Please." His cousin Jennifer waved a manicured hand. "That girl was clearly after the family fortune. We did you a favor." Elias pulled out his phone and pressed play on a recorded conversation. His uncle's voice filled the room, discussing plans to pressure Margaret into signing over her shares while medicated. The color drained from Richard's face. "I've been gathering evidence for months," Elias said quietly. "Every manipulated document, every accidental medication adjustment, every whispered plan to seize control while my mother was vulnerable." He placed a thick folder on the table. "This is just a sample. I have copies with my lawyers, ready to be submitted to the SEC and District Attorney's office." Richard shot to his feet. "You wouldn't dare? This family—" "This family," Elias cut in, "stopped being a family long ago. It's become nothing but a web of greed and manipulation. And I'm done with it." He pulled out another document, sliding it across the glossy table surface. "I'm selling my penthouse, my cars, my vacation properties, everything except the main estate. The proceeds will buy back my mother's shares at triple their market value." Gasps echoed around the table. Jennifer's phone clattered to the floor. "You can't do this!" Richard sputtered. "The board won't—" "The board," Elias's voice cut like steel, "will do exactly nothing. Because if they don't, every document in this folder goes public. How long do you think Hartwell stock prices will survive that kind of scandal?" Richard's face purpled with rage. He shoved back from the table, chair squealing against hardwood, and stormed towards the door. "You'll regret this," he spat. "No," Elias said softly. "For the first time in my life, I don't regret anything." The door slammed behind his uncle. One by one, the others filed out, leaving Elias alone in the vast conference room. He sank into a chair, exhausted but lighter than he'd felt in years. Across town, Janelle sat in a small law office, staring at the documents before her. The lawyer, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, smiled gently. "As you can see, all legal fees have been paid in full. The house is secure, with no outstanding claims or liens. Mr. Hartwell handled everything before." She paused delicately. "Before your departure." Janelle touched the papers with trembling fingers. "When did he do this?" "The morning after the gala. He was quite insistent it be processed immediately." That meant he'd taken care of it before the article, before everything fell apart, before she'd run away. The realization made her chest ache. Thanking the lawyer, Janelle walked home in a daze. The autumn air had turned crisp, leaves crunching beneath her feet. She settled onto her grandmother's porch swing, letting it creak gently as she tried to sort through her tumbling emotions. He'd protected her home even while his world was crumbling. Had he known she would leave? Had he wanted to ensure she'd be safe no matter what happened? The afternoon sun painted long shadows across her grandmother's garden. How many times had she sat here as a little girl, listening to stories about standing tall in the face of adversity? About recognizing true worth beneath surface judgments? Meanwhile, Elias sat in his own lawyer's office, signing document after document. His penthouse? Gone. The beach house in the Hamptons? Gone. 3 luxury cars and his prized vintage collection? Gone. With each signature, he felt another chain of obligation falling away. "The transfers should be complete by end of day," his lawyer said. "Are you sure about this? It's a considerable financial sacrifice." Elias thought of Janelle's smile, of her quiet strength and genuine heart. "Some things are worth more than money." He signed the final paper and stood, checking his watch. The sun was beginning to set, painting the city in shades of gold and purple. Without allowing himself to second-guess, he pulled out his phone and called his driver. "Take me to Cedar Grove," he said quietly. "There's someone I need to see." As the car pulled away from the curb, Elias watched his reflection in the tinted windows. For the first time in his adult life, he saw himself clearly. Not as the Hartwell heir, not as a business titan, but as a man who had finally found something real, something worth fighting for. He just hoped he wasn't too late. The sun painted the sky in brush strokes of amber and rose as Elias's car wound through the quiet streets of Cedar Grove. Ancient oaks lined the sidewalks, their branches stretching over modest homes that had weathered decades of storms and celebrations. This neighborhood held more warmth than all of his gleaming penthouses combined. His driver slowed to a stop in front of Janelle's grandmother's house. The white clapboard structure stood proud despite its age, with cheerful purple flowers still blooming in window boxes. Elias remained in the car for a moment, his hand resting on the leather portfolio containing the deed papers. Through the windshield, he could see a few neighbors pretending not to watch, an elderly man watering his lawn well past necessity, a young mother deliberately taking her time loading groceries from her car. They were protective of their own here. He respected that. "That will be all for today, James," Elias said quietly to his driver. "Take the evening off." The gravel crunched under his shoes as he made his way up the walkway. Each step felt weighted with purpose. The porch boards creaked softly beneath his feet as he approached the door with its faded welcome mat and brass knocker. Elias raised his hand and knocked gently, 3 times. The wait seemed endless, though it couldn't have been more than 30 seconds. Then the door opened, and there she was, Janelle, wearing simple jeans and a soft blue sweater, her eyes widening at the gay sight of him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant chirp of early evening birds and the rustle of autumn leaves in the breeze. Elias drank in the sight of her, noting the shadows beneath her eyes that matched his own sleepless nights. "Janelle," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry." She gripped the doorframe, her knuckles whitening. "Elias, what are you doing here?" "I failed you," he continued, the words tumbling out. "I should have protected you from my family's cruelty. I should have stood up to them immediately instead of letting you take the blame. You deserved so much better." Janelle's breath caught audibly. "Your mother, is she—" "She's stable," Elias assured her, "and she asks for you every day, but that's not why I'm here." He shifted the portfolio in his hands. "I've spent the last 24 hours dismantling everything my family tried to build. I sold the penthouse, the vacation homes, the car collection, all of it. But why would you? Because none of it matters." He interrupted gently. "Those things were just golden handcuffs, keeping me trapped in a life that was slowly killing my soul. You showed me what real wealth looks like, Janelle. It's in the way you care for your patients, the way you honor your grandmother's memory, the way you see the good in people, even when they don't deserve it." Janelle stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind her. The setting sun caught the tears gathering in her eyes. "Would you walk with me?" she asked softly. They descended the porch steps together, following the sidewalk past curious neighbors who quickly found other places to look. The evening air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of wood smoke from somewhere nearby. "I was so afraid," Janelle admitted after they'd walked half a block. "Not of your family's words. I've heard worse before. I was afraid that by being there, I was making everything harder for you. That I was causing problems between you and your mother, your business." "No." Elias stopped walking, turning to face her. "You brought peace into my life for the first time in years. You showed me what it means to have someone in your corner who expects nothing in return except basic human kindness. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" A tear slipped down Janelle's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but more followed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't mean to cry. It's just, these past few weeks have been so much. The house pretending to be married, feeling things I wasn't supposed to feel." Elias's heart thundered in his chest at her words. But first he had a promise to keep. He opened the portfolio and withdrew the deed papers, holding them out to her. "You will never have to worry about losing your home again," he said firmly. "Everything is paid for, all legal issues resolved. The house is yours, free and clear, exactly as your grandmother wanted." Janelle stared at the papers, then back at him. "But why? After I left?" "Because you deserve security. Because this home holds your memories. And because I—" He paused, gathering his courage. "Because I care about you. More than I ever expected to. More than I probably have any right to." They stood there in the gathering dusk, autumn leaves dancing around their feet, while neighbors peeked through curtains at the unlikely pair, the tall businessman in his expensive suit and the curvy nurse's aide in her worn jeans, both looking at each other like they were seeing sunshine for the first time after a long storm. Janelle took the papers with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for this, but for everything. For treating me like I mattered. For showing me that sometimes fairy tales can have a grain of truth, even if they don't end quite the way we expect." "Who says this is an ending?" Elias asked softly. The streetlights flickered on, one by one, casting warm pools of light around them. In the distance, a dog barked, and someone's wind chimes tinkled in the breeze. But for Elias and Janelle, the world had narrowed to just this moment, just this sidewalk, just the space between their heartbeats as they stood beneath the gathering stars, holding on to papers that represented so much more than property. They held promise and healing, and perhaps even a beginning. The morning sun cast long shadows across Janelle's front yard as a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Her heart skipped when she saw Elias carefully helping his mother from the passenger seat into a padded wheelchair. Mrs. Hartwell looked fragile but determined, her silver hair neatly styled and a warm shawl draped across her shoulders. Janelle hurried down the porch steps, her hands fidgeting with her simple cotton dress. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm so happy to see you up and about. Please, dear, call me Margaret." The older woman's eyes sparkled as she reached for Janelle's hands. "I've been praying for you every day since you left. My son has been absolutely lost without you." Elias coughed softly, a slight blush creeping up his neck. "Mother." "Oh, hush." Margaret waved him off. "I'm old enough to speak my mind, and weak enough that you can't stop me." Janelle couldn't help but laugh, the sound breaking through the tension of the moment. She gestured toward the yard where she'd set up comfortable chairs under the shade of an old maple tree. "I thought we might enjoy the afternoon outside. The weather is perfect." "Wonderful idea." Margaret agreed as Elias wheeled her carefully across the grass. "This reminds me of my mother's garden. She used to grow the most beautiful roses." They settled into a comfortable arrangement, with Margaret's wheelchair positioned between two chairs. Janelle brought out a tray of iced tea and homemade cookies, setting it on a small folding table. "These cookies," Margaret said after taking a bite, "remind me of something my grandmother used to make. What's your secret?" "A dash of cinnamon and nutmeg," Janelle replied, settling into her chair. "My grandmother taught me. She always said baking was about love more than ingredients." "Wise woman, your grandmother." Margaret's eyes grew thoughtful. "You know, when Elias was little, he used to help me in the kitchen, until his father decided it wasn't appropriate for a Hartwell heir to be caught wearing an apron." Elias shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mother." "No, let her tell me," Janelle said softly, reaching over to touch his hand. "I want to know everything about little Elias." The afternoon unfolded like a gentle dream, filled with stories that bridged 3 generations of family history. Margaret shared tales of Elias's childhood, his secret cookie-stealing expeditions, his first attempt at riding a bike, the time he tried to adopt every stray cat in the neighborhood. Janelle responded with her own memories of growing up in this very house, learning to garden from her grandmother, watching thunderstorms from the safety of the front porch. As the shadows lengthened, Elias noticed his mother trying to hide her fatigue. "We should get you back to the hospital, Mother. The doctor was very clear about not overdoing it." Margaret sighed but nodded. "You're right, dear. But Janelle..." She reached out to grasp the younger woman's hand again. "Thank you for this afternoon. It's been so long since I've felt this peaceful." Janelle squeezed her hand gently. "You're welcome here any time, Margaret. This house has always been a place of healing." As Elias helped his mother back into the car, she whispered something that made him pause, then smile softly. He drove away with a promise to return soon, leaving Janelle to clean up the remnants of their afternoon gathering. The sun had set by the time she heard his car return. She'd just switched on the porch light when he appeared at the bottom of the steps, his tie loosened and his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. "Mother's settled back in her room," he said, climbing the steps slowly. "The nurses said her vital signs are stronger than they've been in weeks." "I'm so glad," Janelle replied, watching as he drew closer. Something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "You know what she whispered to me before we left?" He stopped just a step below her. She said, "Don't let this one go, Elias. She's the real thing." Before Janelle could respond, Elias lowered himself to one knee. The gesture wasn't smooth or practiced. He actually stumbled slightly, catching himself on the porch railing. But when he looked up at her, his eyes held such raw honesty that Janelle's breath caught in her throat. "I'm not doing this because of my mother or my family or any obligation," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm doing this because these past weeks have shown me what real love looks like. It looks like quiet strength and endless compassion. It looks like someone who sees past surfaces to the heart beneath. It looks like you, Janelle." Tears began streaming down her cheeks as he continued. "We started with pretense, but every moment since has been real. I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to build a life with you. Not in my world or your world, but in a new one we create together. Will you marry me? Not for show, not for anyone else, but for us?" Janelle's tears fell faster as she nodded, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Yes. Yes, I will." Elias rose quickly, gathering her into his arms. They held each other tightly as the night air swirled around them, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke and possibility. After a long moment, Elias pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "I don't want to wait," he said softly. "No big ceremony, no media circus. Just us, tomorrow morning, with my mother as our witness. What do you think?" Janelle thought of her grandmother, who had always told her that when love was real, it didn't need fancy trappings. "Tomorrow morning sounds perfect," she answered, her heart full of quiet joy. They stood together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The soft glow of the porch light enveloped them in a gentle circle of warmth, a promise of the home they would build together, not in a mansion or a modest house, but in each other's hearts. Dawn arrived with gentle grace that morning, painting the sky in soft brushstrokes of pink and gold. Janelle stood at her bedroom window, watching the sun rise over her grandmother's, now her, home one last time as a single woman. Her fingers traced the simple white dress she'd chosen, nothing fancy or elaborate, just pure and true, like the love that had brought them to this day. A soft knock at her door made her turn. "Come in," she called, expecting her neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who'd offered to help her get ready. Instead, there stood Elias, already dressed in a crisp navy suit, looking slightly sheepish. "I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, but—" He held up a small velvet box. "This belonged to my mother, and she insisted I bring it to you this morning." Janelle's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a delicate pearl necklace. "Oh, Elias." "Mother said every bride needs something borrowed," he explained, his voice soft with emotion. "May I?" She nodded, turning so he could fasten the pearls around her neck. His fingers were gentle, and she felt their warmth against her skin. When she faced him again, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You're not supposed to see me yet." She teased, but her own eyes were growing misty. He smiled, touching her cheek softly. "I'll see you at the chapel in an hour. Mother's already ordering the nurses around, making sure everything's perfect." The hospital chapel was small, but filled with morning light streaming through stained glass windows. The hospital gardeners had outdone themselves, bringing in fresh flowers from their gardens, roses, daisies, and late-blooming chrysanthemums arranged in simple glass vases along the pews and altar. Margaret Hartwell sat in her wheelchair in the front row, looking stronger than she had in weeks. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she watched the small gathering of people file in, just a few hospital staff who'd become friends, Mrs. Patterson from next door, and the kind social worker who'd first brought Janelle that fateful letter about her house. When the chapel door opened and Janelle appeared, Elias felt his heart stop. She walked slowly down the short aisle, carrying a bouquet of white roses from the hospital garden. Her dress was simple but elegant, flowing around her curves like water. But it was her face that captivated him. The pure love and trust in her eyes made his throat tight with emotion. The hospital chaplain, a gentle-voiced man with silver hair, led them through their vows. Their words echoed in the small space, filled with meaning that went far beyond the traditional promises. "I, Elias, take you, Janelle." His voice was steady but thick with feeling. "To be my wife, to love and cherish, to support and protect, to share all of life's joys and sorrows. I promise to always see you with my heart, to honor your strength and gentleness, and to thank God every day for bringing you into my life." Tears slid down Janelle's cheeks as she spoke her vows. "I, Janelle, take you, Elias, to be my husband, to love and cherish, to support and inspire, to share all of life's challenges and celebrations. I promise to always believe in your goodness, to honor your courage to choose love, and to thank God every day for bringing us together." Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief as they exchanged rings, simple gold bands that symbolized their commitment to authenticity over show. "By the power vested in me," the chaplain smiled warmly, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Elias drew Janelle close, his kiss tender and reverent. The small gathering burst into applause, Margaret's voice rising above them all. "Praise the Lord!" After the ceremony, they wheeled Margaret out to the hospital's garden courtyard. The morning sun had warmed the autumn air, and the last roses of the season nodded their heads in a gentle breeze. "Now," Margaret instructed, "I want proper family photos. Elias, stand behind Janelle. Yes, just like that. Now smile, both of you. These aren't for magazines or shareholders. These are for us, for our family album." The hospital's staff photographer, who usually took ID badges, captured image after image. Elias and Janelle together, then with Margaret between them, all three laughing as Margaret told embarrassing stories about Elias's childhood. These weren't posed society photos. They were real moments, full of joy and love. Later that week, Elias called a press conference at the Hartwell Foundation, headquarters. Janelle stood beside him, her hand in his, as he made the announcement. "In honor of Sarah Brooks, a woman who dedicated her life to nurturing and uplifting others, the Hartwell Foundation is establishing the Sarah Brooks Empowerment Program." His voice carried clearly through the room. "This initiative will provide educational support, mentorship, and business grants to disadvantaged young women, helping them build the futures they dream of." Janelle squeezed his hand, thinking of how proud her grandmother would be, not just of the program bearing her name, but of the man who had chosen to honor her legacy this way. As the sun set that evening, they stood in the backyard of what was now their home, Janelle's grandmother's house, restored but maintaining its warm, welcoming character. Children's laughter drifted over from the park down the street, mixing with the chirp of crickets and the rustle of autumn leaves. "I could have bought us any house in the city," Elias mused, his arm around Janelle's waist. "But this is home." Janelle leaned against him, watching the sky turn from gold to purple. "It always has been. Now it's just bigger, not in size, but in heart. Big enough for both our stories, for Mother's visits, for all the love we'll share here." The sound of children playing grew louder as a game of tag spilled onto their street. Elias and Janelle watched them run past, their young faces glowing with innocence and joy. "Your grandmother would be proud," Elias said softly, "not just of the foundation program, but of you. of how you never lost your faith in love and goodness, even when the world tried to tell you that you weren't enough. She would be proud of you too, Janelle replied, turning to face him, for finding the courage to be true to your heart, to choose what matters most. They stood together in the growing dusk, their shadows merging into one as the first stars appeared overhead. The neighborhood settled into evening peace around them, punctuated by distant laughter and the occasional car passing by. This was their new beginning, not a fairy tale ending, but a real-life love story built on compassion, faith, and the kind of redemption that comes from choosing truth over pretense, substance over surface, and love over fear. In this moment, as day transformed into night, they held each other close, knowing they had found something rare and precious, a love that had started as pretense but had grown into the deepest truth of their lives. Their journey had taught them that real wealth wasn't measured in dollars or status, but in the capacity to see with the heart, to choose courage over comfort, and to build a life rich in meaning and genuine connection. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.